Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. Yeah, end of the week, 2 days off. At least I hope so. Nice, clear, sunny day. Although, what's the weather supposed to be like this weekend? Does anyone?
Sunday snow.
What's that?
On Sunday snow.
Sunday snow. Okay, like lots.
Maybe, I'm not so sure.
Oh, lots or a little bit.
Let me check.
It's raining.
It's gonna rain.
19% rain.
19 what?
19%. So it's not big.
Oh, 19%.
It's gonna be raining.
All the next week's gonna be raining? Oh, okay. Okay, well then enjoy the sunlight while you can, because it will not last. But then spring will come, I promise. Doesn't it feel springy to you already out there? With the light and Mulder's got a very skeptical look on his face.
When is spring supposed to come?
You will probably, it's a little bit cold. If you pay attention to flower beds, you should start to see like little bulbs coming up, like tulips or crocuses or things. So they should start to come up right away. If you look carefully on the trees, you might see some of them are starting to, the leaves are starting to bud. They might not be there quite yet, but we're very close. And so, in a couple weeks you'll see those, and then once it gets a little bit warmer, the leaves will pop out, and then all of a sudden it'll be spring.
I believe you.
Believe me. Was anyone here last spring? You were here last spring? Yeah. So we're close, right? It'll happen. It'll happen. Okay. So Abby is here. Good morning, Abby. Ryan is here. Good morning to you. And Simrat is here. Good morning, Simrat. Here we go. So yesterday we were kind of leading into, well, we led into this talk about human sexuality, and it was a bit of, in part it was a bit spoiled because Scotty asked a really good question yesterday about double standards, not yesterday, earlier in the week, about double standards between men and women, and I foolishly answered his question. And really what I should have done is waited until we could actually talk about this, but I kind of spoiled the punchline of that discussion by answering his question. And again, it was a good question, but I had planned to deal with it anyway. But anyway, we were talking about control of human sexuality, and sexual activity and behavior is kind of at the very core of what culture is, right? All cultures have rules about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Some cultures have very rigid, tight controls. Others are a little more loose and relaxed. But every culture has them, and they're all sort of very deeply held, and it is emotionally upsetting when those rules are violated. And so we said in the West here, at least traditionally, that might be changing a little bit. But in the West, men were expected to be the dominant ones, the promiscuous ones, the ones who were in control and in charge and pursuing women, right? And women were expected to be a little more on the submissive side. They were the ones who were being pursued. And promiscuity, so having multiple sexual partners, was far less acceptable for women than it was for men. And the question that Scotty rightly asked was, well, why is that, right? Why do we have these double standards? And so to talk about that, we watched this TED Talk by Christopher Ryan, author of Sex at Dawn, and whoops, I've got an extra slide in there, a couple extra slides. And so he was making an argument, and he compared us to other apes, because he said, of course, humans aren't descended from apes. We are apes. You all are apes, sadly. Sorry, so am I. We're all apes, right? And Christopher Ryan said, well, what kind of ape are we? And so he compared this female copulatory behavior, so women females of the species making noise during sex. He looked at external testicles. Well, he didn't actually look at them. He included them in his analysis. And the availability of female animals for intercourse, right? And so he made up this nifty little graphic, which nobody's really looking at right now because everyone's either looking at their phone or looking away. But look at this. Isn't this nice? Beautiful, right? And based on his comparisons, this is kind of a summary of some of his data, but he says, yeah, we're much more like bonobos and chimpanzees in terms of our sexual behavior. And both of those animals are promiscuous. They're not pair bonders, right? A male and a female don't bond together for life. That's not how these animals kind of work. Incidentally, the geese that you see over in the park or you see flying around and honking, they're pair bonders. So male and female geese, they bond, and they bond for life, actually. And they will follow each other around and have, they'll hatch eggs year after year, but they're always the same two. I think the crows are like that too, that you see around here. The crows pair bond. But some primates do that, but chimpanzees and bonobos don't. And Christopher Ryan says, well, we're kind of most like chimps and bonobos, and so we're maybe not pair bonders either. And so he's kind of making an argument here that, at least biologically speaking, humans are animals that use sexual activity to create and maintain social relationships. It's not all about procreation. It's not all about having babies. There's some other reason for humans' sexuality, and that's to create a social relationship, a social network. Do you see the resemblance, me and him? Maybe not. Like 99% of our DNA is the same, so I don't know. We're related somehow, I'm sure. Yeah, so he said that if you compare us to other primates, we're much more like these promiscuous primates rather than monogamous primates. He said if you look at this earlier theory of men and women, and men providing meat and shelter and status and protection, and women offering their sexual fidelity, right? They promise they won't have sex with any other men. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because we know a lot about hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers don't work that way. Hunter-gatherers share everything. And in fact, women are the ones who do the gathering, and women are usually the ones who produce food on a more consistent basis, right? If you go hunting, sometimes you miss with your arrow, right? You don't get anything and you come home empty-handed. And so women are kind of the ones that are feeding hunter-gatherer groups most consistently. So this kind of exchange between, men offering all of these things and women promising sexual, makes no sense in a hunter-gatherer context. They just don't work that way. And so he says this is kind of what he thinks is the case, and the reason that this doesn't seem to represent our sort of modern society, the reason that people aren't really running around having sex with multiple partners, has to do with agriculture, right? And he said that, again, if you look cross-culturally, if you look at hunter-gatherers, they don't really care much about the parentage of the child. They don't care who the father is so much. And we heard about in Christopher Ryan's TED Talk, in some societies, you can actually have multiple fathers, right? Biologically. Of course, we know that's not the science, that's not the way it works, but in their culture, that is the way it works. A child can have multiple fathers. And so, yeah, hunter-gatherers aren't really that concerned about that sort of thing, but agricultural communities are, right? Agricultural communities tend to have more inequality between men and women, and they tend to have more strict controls on sexuality, and they're more concerned about who the father is. And again, I kind of spoiled the answer to this question, but really what it has to do with is the inheritance of land and the passing down of wealth, right? Those have traditionally gone through the male side of the family, and I think in most societies that's the way it works, or at least worked in the past. Not every society is like that, but most are. And so, in order to pass down wealth and land through the male line, you have to make sure your kid is actually yours, right? And again, there's no DNA testing hundreds or thousands of years ago. The only way to be sure is to make sure that people only have sex with their marriage partner, right? That is it. And so, again, you see these very tight controls on sexuality, and you see very strong punishments for breaking those rules, particularly if you are a woman. And in some places in the world, those kind of norms and expectations for sexual behavior are still very much in force, right? And so, you know, if people have sex outside of marriage, yeah, if you're the husband, it's not good. You definitely shouldn't do that. But if you're the female partner and you have sex outside of marriage, there can be some pretty stern consequences for that action, right? And for the most part, not in all societies, but in most societies, it comes from this, right? It comes from the ability to pass down land, and so you control people's sexuality to ensure that, you know, if a man has a son, he knows that that son is actually his and not someone else's. And again, this is kind of what Christopher Ryan is talking about when he's talking about women's sexuality being conflated. That's another fancy word, by the way. If you want to sound smart, use agency and conflated, and people will be like, "Oh, this person's smart." Conflated is kind of like combined or collapsed or made the same. So here, their sexuality is being sort of combined with property rights, and so in order to pass down land, women's sexuality is controlled, and over time, women actually kind of come to be seen as property in some societies. There was a case in, I think it was the early 1900s in Canada, and it was a sexual assault case. It was a rape case, and I wish I had more detail, but I can't remember all the details on this. It was a rape case, but the interesting thing was when it went to court, the rapist was actually the woman's husband. So the woman's husband was accused of rape, and I think the argument that the Crown prosecutor was making, or the argument that the defense was making, was that, well, how can you rape your own wife, right? It's like my phone. Can I steal my own phone? No, you can't steal something that belongs to you. So by that measure, how can it be rape if it's your own wife, right? And of course, now we are in a much more evolved place, and we say, whoops. Sorry, I'm getting a conference call that I can't take. One sec. Sorry about that. Sorry, Mark, I can't take your call right now. So now we're in a much more evolved place. We know about consent, and we know that, of course, that's wrong, that's ridiculous. But at the time, that was actually an argument they were making, right? That men could not rape their wives because, in a way, their wives belonged to them. Has anyone ever been to like a Western-style marriage in a church, a wedding? Have you been to one? Yeah, or at least seen one on TV? Yeah, of course, everyone's seen one on TV. They're very popular. And so what happens, right? So before the wedding starts, let's pretend it's in a church. In the church, there's a priest up here, right? And the groom is standing there with his best man, and his best man is whispering things in his ear, like, "You can do this, buddy," or "It's not too late, run away." No, it's not saying that. Anyway, that's happening. And where does the bride come from? How does the bride enter the church?
Sunflower goes in front.
Yeah, so the flower girls come down the aisle. They're very cute. They're all dressed up in their pretty dresses, and they got flowers. And then the bride comes down the aisle with her father, right? Her father's, arm in arm, and he's probably got a little tear in his eye, and it's very sweet, right? And then they come up to the front and he, gives her a little kiss and says, "Oh, you look beautiful," or something, and then he sits down and she goes up and they do the ceremony, right? But that part of it is called giving her away, right? The father is giving away his daughter, which kind of implies ownership, does it not? Like, his daughter actually belongs to him, and now he's going to give her to this other guy, and then she'll belong to him, right? And it's kind of weird because, we still do that nowadays. We still practice that tradition, and most women, I think, do want their fathers to give them away if their fathers are alive and in their lives. But most women wouldn't kind of think about that part of the ritual that way, right? They wouldn't say, "Oh, well, yes, now I belong to my husband now." But it's still kind of, it's an echo, right? It's a remnant of an earlier time when we actually did, almost consider women as property, things that could be owned by men. Just kind of strange. Mulder, did you want to add to that?
No, you just ruined it.
There's a lot of things that are ruined in this class. But, the thing is, and actually we can talk about this in the next thing I'll show you, is that one of the first things we said about culture, I think, in this class is that culture changes, right? Culture's not static, it's always kind of evolving and changing. And so, yeah, sometimes we have these traditions that are old, right, and that are connected to problematic ideas in the past. And sometimes that means that we should just stop doing them, right? There's good reasons to stop doing these things. But the other thing that cultures can do is they can recontextualize them, right? Culture is a symbolic language, right? And so, that giving away of the bride used to mean one thing, but it doesn't mean it always has to, right? We can change the meaning of it.
What about if her father wasn't alive?
If her father's not, good morning. If her father's not alive, sometimes it'll be a family friend or an uncle or someone who's been like a father to her. There are some cases where nobody like that exists for the bride, and so she'll just come down the aisle on her own, which I think is not that common. But usually someone will walk her down the aisle. Usually it's a male, and if it's not her father, it's someone who's been like a father to her sometimes. Yeah, so, but that's the thing, Mulder, is that, I don't mean to ruin it, but again, you can recontextualize it and create new meaning for it. And it's sweet, right? It's sweet to have your father walk you down the aisle, right? Because you are entering into a new phase of your life, arguably, if in a typical family, a little girl's father is the most important guy in her life, right? Or at least I would hope that would be the case. And now she's kind of entering into a phase of her life where her husband is going to be kind of the most important guy in her life. And so, it's kind of if you recontextualize it, if you change the meaning of that practice, it's not bad and it's kind of sweet. But again, some customs can be, recontextualized or reworked. Some, you just do away with because they just don't fit anymore, or people don't want to do them. But yeah, don't let it ruin it for you. It's still sweet. Girls still want their fathers to walk them down the aisle. But again, the original meaning was kind of based on the fact that, that the women were very dependent on men in society, either their fathers or their husbands, right? Now, sorry, I'm just going to check one thing before I keep going here. Okay, that's good morning. So one of the things that we haven't really talked about here, and I just wanted to fly this definition in, is something called the patriarchy. Have you heard that word before? Patriarchy? Yeah. So this is actually what it is kind of a situation in which men are in charge and men are assumed to be superior somehow. The word comes from two Greek words, patros is father, and archon, which is ruler. And so patros, archon, the father as the ruler, right? And so we kind of see this sort of patriarchal idea reflected in society all over the place, right? We see in most kind of monotheistic religions, God is imagined to be a man, right? Certainly the Christian God and the Jewish God, he's kind of imagined to be a he, and he's described as a he in the Bible, right? For any Muslims in the room, good morning. Is Allah is thought of to be male? Yes. No. Is he beyond?
No.
He's beyond any kind of gender. Is that true? Yeah. Interesting. I kind of always imagined him as a man, but certainly the Christian God is imagined and depicted as a man, right? As is his son Jesus, right? Jesus is very clearly shown as a man. Good morning. Yeah, so we see like that. We see gods, we see heads of religion. Certainly in the church I grew up with, all of the holy people, all of the priests were also men, right? Heads of households are usually men, although sometimes the woman is the power behind the scenes, but often men are the head of the household, right? We see that in terms of leading major corporations, in terms of leading government, in many places in the world, men are also the head of those things as well. And again, women in the past were seen as superior, inferior, less than, not as competent, right? And so, oops, there we go. Let me just see what I was saying here. Oh, yeah, and so we have this kind of situation in which in the past we had pretty marked inequality between men and women, right? And part of that had to do with agriculture and property rights. Part of it had to do with the fact that, and I'm not sure if we talked about this in this class, but women were, when people first switched to agriculture, women were kind of removed from the production of food, right? I said that hunter-gatherers, women are the ones who collect most of the food for the group, and men sort of go out hunting and they provide meat when they can, but they're, the consistent feeders of the group are women. But when people switch to agriculture, women kind of get stuck in the home, right? Because it becomes more useful to have more children as a farmer, right? Farms are a lot of work. There's a lot of work to do, and if you have 8 or 9 kids, then you have your own little workforce that you don't have to pay, right? And so people start to do that. Farming families tend to be much larger, right? If you're a hunter-gatherer group, you cannot have 9 kids because you're moving around all the time, right? You are walking 10 to 12 kilometers every day. You can't have 3 little children with you. It doesn't work, right? So hunter-gatherer mothers tend to have kids much less frequently. Farming families tend to be much bigger and have many more kids because they don't have to move around, and you can put them to work. And so again, women are kind of lose power as people switch to farming, and they kind of stay that way for a long time. But interestingly, I know women are sort of in the process of kind of regaining that equality, right? We're in the process of getting back to reestablishing that equality. And we're not there yet, of course. We're not perfectly equal. And one of the questions one might ask is, well, why, right? Why are we not? Why have we not achieved equality? We've been to the moon, for crying out loud, right? A man has walked on the moon. We just dropped a rover on Mars that's running around filming Mars. If we can do that, how come we cannot create a society in which men and women have equal opportunity and equal resources? I think that's a reasonable question to ask. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard. I think landing a rover on Mars is ridiculously complicated, and yet we have done it, right? So why haven't we been able to do this? So I thought we'd watch this this short documentary here, and it's called that very thing, right? What stands in the way of women being equal to men? And so in it we will hear from, I think, 4 or 5 young women. They're all about, I'm guessing they're all about 16 years old, 15 or 16 years old. They live in different countries of the world. We have one girl from Iceland, one from Jordan, one from Lesotho, and one from the UK, from London. And so our narrator here, our host, will kind of go around, talk to these girls, talk to their families, and try to answer that question. So why do we still have a situation where men and women are not equal in society? And I know I'm forgetting about gender non-binary and gender fluid people for the moment. I haven't forgotten about them, but I'm just dealing with this. So in this little documentary, I want you to pay attention to, again, messages that are being circulated about what men and women are like, what boys and girls are like, what men and women should do, or boys and girls should do, or should not do. Are these messages based in some sort of biological reality or biological fact? Social institutions, how are they involved in this process? So social institutions like the family, government, law enforcement, education, religion, all those things. And yeah, and the question, of course, is what's really standing in the way, right? Why do we still not have equality yet? Okay. Yeah. So for online people, I'm just going to make sure that this is posted in Teams for you, and it is. Yes. Yes.
What would happen if women, if sexual equality is weak?
Probably the end of society, Scotty. Do you want? Well, let's press pause on that, and maybe we'll come back to that at the end. Okay. What might that look like? Okay. Because that's a good question, actually, and it's worth talking about. Yeah. Okay. So online people will watch. Watch 25 minutes, take a 10-minute break, then we'll come back and talk about some of these, so that'll be in 35 minutes. So the questions and the video link are in Microsoft Teams, so you can see them there, and we'll come back to you in a little bit, okay? So enjoy. Okay, good people, we are back. So we've got, are there 4 girls? There's Vigdis from Iceland, there's Mira from Jordan, there's Shway Shway from Lesotho, and there is Lulu from the UK. There are 4 girls. So what kind of things are these girls expressing to us in terms of their experience in society, and what kind of messages they are receiving from society about girls and boys?
Girls are not allowed to go for dates.
In some cases, yeah. So Vigdis is out late, but who's not out late?
Muslim girls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mira seems to be seems to have some rules on, you know, who she can go out with and when and where. What else do we hear?
They're not allowed to play some rock sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're hanging out at the basketball court with Mira's older brother Saad, but he's playing basketball, and she kind of expresses the idea that she's not really allowed to play or invited to play. What else do we hear?
I'm not so sure, but the women are supposed to breastfeed the children, I think.
Oh, is that Shway Shway's mom who was talking about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was kind of talking more about, it wasn't really about breastfeeding, but I think it was more about the idea that raising a child is something that is like, the woman is sort of biologically made for, or, you know, that they have some sort of advantage over men in terms of raising children. There's something that's sort of natural that, you know, makes women better caretakers of children than men. I think that's what her mom was trying to express. What was her name? Her mom's name? It was a great name. Oh boy, Masakanyana? Is that it? I don't know. It's a great name. Anyway, what else do we hear? Oh yeah, we hear Lulu, right? And Lulu is kind of being slut-shamed by British boys, right? And so the boys in school are kind of talking about the boys in... Oh boy, okay, hang on. I'm just gonna wait till everybody sits down here. So, yeah, so Lulu's kind of, and her friends are being slut-shamed, right? So these boys in Lulu's school, they're talking about all the sex they're having, which they're not, but they're talking about the sex they're having. And they're kind of using some kind of hurtful language towards the girls, right? And again, it's interesting that all of those words, all of those negative labels that get used, and I'm not going to repeat them all here, but it's interesting how much of them have to do with sexuality and sexual behavior, right? All of the sort of negative terms that Lulu and her friends say that, you know, boys are using, or boys are calling them this or calling them that, all of those terms have to do with sexuality or sexual behavior, or, you know, improper sexual behavior, right? All of those terms have to do with that. What else do we hear?
Muslim girls are not allowed to smoke.
Right. So yeah. So Mira says if she was, you know, allowed to, you know, do what boys do, she would smoke. And if she was my daughter, I would say, no, you wouldn't, Mira. You're 15. You are not smoking cigarettes. But anyway, that is Mira's desire.
It's not that it's sexist, but also my father didn't allow me to smoke, you know.
Mhm.
It's for parents, not for girls.
It's true, right? I think probably most parents in most countries who had any sort of knowledge of the health effects of cigarettes would probably tell their children that no, you should not smoke, or at least, at the very least, you have to wait until you're 18, right, or whatever. But yeah, so Mira's kind of joking around there, I think, but yeah, I don't think, even if she was a 15-year-old boy, her father would not let her smoke either. So that's not sexism. That's just that's good parenting, is what that is. What else do we hear? Right. So we heard a little bit about Mira's father, Marwan, right? And Marwan is saying, there's, some girls that he's okay with, his daughter hanging out with, but there's other girls that he would prefer that she not not associate with, right? That she not kind of hang out with. Um, what what'd you think of that? Did you think that was strange or normal or?
Normal according to the culture and strange according to my personal taste.
Why do you say strange?
Because you don't have freedom.
Because she doesn't have freedom?
She's no longer a kid. She knows what's good and bad for her. So she can, at least at the age of 15, you can identify people.
Yeah, so the idea is she's no longer a kid, she's 15 years old, she's old enough to choose her own friends, right? Her father shouldn't have any say in that. I'd like to hear more about that, but it's worth pointing out too that culturally speaking, there's kind of there's a difference in terms of when parents' children get independence and when they're allowed to sort of make their own decisions and what decisions they're allowed to make. And sometimes that varies according to culture, definitely varies within families even within one culture. Some kids are encouraged to be more independent than others. But yeah, I mean, there's, there are cultures around the world where parents are heavily involved in the selection of a husband or a wife for their child, right? And then there are other cultures where it's like, mom and dad, you have nothing to say here, right? This is my decision. And that's kind of the way it is in the West, right? People find their own marriage partners. Other places in the world, yeah, parents are heavily involved in that process. And so there's variation in terms of how independent children actually are from their parents and at what age. That's a cultural difference as well. But it's true. There's she is old enough, but that said, it's probably normal for parents to, look at the friends of their children and either approve or disapprove, I would think, right? Is that a normal thing? Yeah, I wouldn't want my kids hanging out with a bunch of, pot smoking losers or something, right? I don't want that, right? What I would do about it is a different thing, but I would have an opinion. What else? What else do we hear?
The lady, like the wedding that she saw during the wedding to the man.
Oh, right. We were just hearing about that, right? We were just hearing about that. That was with Shui Shui's mom, and they were talking. They were out in the country talking to her great uncle, and they were talking about this custom. And I keep trying to remember the name of the custom, but I missed it. But it's an exchange, right? So with the marriage, the bride's family gives some sort of gift to the groom's family, right? Whether it's money or cows or some other valuable thing that sort of takes place before the marriage occurs. And yeah, the young there's some interesting ideas, right? What are the young people kind of talking about with regard to that custom? Shui Shui and her schoolmates.
Like, is it normal to give cows during a wedding, like to sell or buy a cow?
I don't think it's literally cows.
Well, in the past, it probably would have
Yeah,
been.
in the past.
Yeah. Now it's kind of metaphorical cows, although maybe not, right? Maybe there's a lot of. Is it? It's real cows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cows, goats, and chicken.
Not girls,
Just cows and money. Yeah. It's It depends on your economy, right? There's probably still lots of people who are herding cattle in that part of the world, so yeah, you pay in cows. I'm guessing anyway. Or do you think people just like to receive cows?
It depends on tribes.
Okay.
There are different tribes.
the another one is we are giving out animals and the other one money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a more of a tribal custom or expectation.
Tribal, but you must give out the dowry.
Right.
Yeah.
Can the in your experience can the groom's family I guess they can say exactly what they want, right? I only want cows, I don't want money, or I only want money, I don't want cows, or can they say what they want? I guess they probably can, right?
Not really, but
No?
in other tribes, cows are not.
Cows are, yeah.
What tribe are you?
Sorry. But you are.
So
is it the groom side that's getting cows? It's not the woman?
The woman's side.
It's the woman side receiving.
Yeah, receiving.
Yeah.
Oh yes, sorry. Did I say that backwards? Did I say it backwards? Right. So yeah. So the woman's side is receiving, right? Because that's the sale thing, right? They give up their daughter and they get the cows, or they get the money, or both. Yeah. So it feels So for the young girls, it kind of feels like a sale, right? It feels like an economic transaction.
Maybe it's like an engagement ring.
What's that?
It's like an engagement ring. Like personally, we get money and jewels, not cows, and it goes directly to us. I wouldn't say I'm being sold. I would say I'm being courted.
Yes, but that's very interesting, right? Because here we're looking at that's very interesting. Because here we're looking at two different customs, and they have to do with financial exchange, but they're in kind of different forms, right? So Nasra says, yeah, if a guy asks to marry me, I want an engagement ring with lots of diamonds, lots of sparkly, pretty things, please. I actually know of a story where someone, a guy proposed to a woman, and the ring wasn't big enough. And so she said, if you want to marry me, you're going to need a bigger ring than that. So he actually went back and got a bigger ring. And she did say yes, but it was a bit of a negotiation. She wanted a little more. But it's interesting, right? Because are these two customs really different? An exchange of cows or money versus an exchange or a gift of diamonds. You can't wear a herd of cows on your finger, obviously, and a herd of cows is not nearly as beautiful as a ring of diamonds, or maybe that's a matter of opinion. But are these things really different? Why do they value diamonds? It's just rock. Because value is also socially constructed. For most things, unless humans can actually eat them, most things for humans have value because humans say they have value.
I think carat is diamonds.
Yeah, that's how they measure them. Yeah, diamonds they're quite sparkly, right? They're quite beautiful stones. They are useful because they're very hard, and so you can use them in drill bits and things like that. But yeah, they're valuable because people say they're valuable, right? Also, they are slightly on the rare side, although not quite as rare as sometimes the diamond industry likes to sell you on. But yeah, they have value because people say they do. And basically anything, some things have intrinsic value, like food because you need to eat or you'll die, or clean water because you need to drink clean water or you'll die. Those things have air, clean air has intrinsic value, but everything else is it has value because we say it does. Right. So are these things different then? This exchange of wedding rings or herds of cows?
No, just different culture.
different culture, but it's just a different thing, right? And and again, there's this idea of value, right? The diamond ring has symbolic value, right? The ring is eternal or whatever, but also it's a cultural expectation, right? That's what you do when you propose, is you give a diamond ring and you say, please marry me. That's the custom, right? In other parts of the world, it's cows, right? And again, I would not like to receive a gift of 50 cows. I have no I have no room for cows. They're very tasty to eat, but I don't want to deal with 50 cows. I prefer, yes, I do not want those. Those do not hold value for me. But in other parts of the world, it's not the case, right? The cows do hold value. And not only do they hold value, but they're their tradition, right? That's what people have traditionally used in kind of marriage exchanges. And so there's value, there's economic value, but there's also symbolic or traditional value, right? That's what is normally done, right? And you kind of hear that from some of Shui Shui's relatives, right? This is the way things are done, right? If she comes to us with a problem, we'll tell her what to do, what is supposed to happen. This is tradition, this is culture, this is what we do, right? And so, yeah. What were those young people there, her schoolmates? What were they saying about marriage in terms of careers and things like that?
Yeah, the guy will not marry a woman who earns more than him.
Yeah, both of those young guys seem to have a bit of a problem with the. No, I think they both did. I think both those guys, yeah, were saying, yeah, like, because what the guy further away from the camera was saying, yeah, he didn't want that. He couldn't handle that. And then the guy closer to the camera was saying, yeah, well, I'm the man, right? I'm the provider. And if my wife's making more money than me, then what good am I, right? What is my role? What is my use, right? And so, which is interesting because it's a very, a lot of this is about girls, obviously, and why women aren't equal. But that's actually a bit of a stereotype or a gender expectation for men. And it's kind of damaging, right? Because, he sees himself as the provider for the household, like the head of the household, which is fine. But the minute his wife makes more than him, he immediately questions his value, right? Oh, well, what good am I if I'm not the provider? And it's the question, well, like, is that all a father is good for? Paying the bills. Is that all us guys are for, right? So we can go out to work, make lots of money, and pay the bills. And if we can't do that, then what good are we, right? How useful is a stereotype like that, right? Especially if you happen to lose your job, which sometimes guys do, right? Sometimes guys get laid off, sometimes their company closes. And yeah, like, not only do you have financial stress, but now you have this idea that, oh, well, you are now worthless because you don't have a paycheck, right? So I would argue that, those guys are expressing the sort of cultural values that they've absorbed, and those cultural values are not just in Lesotho culture, they are widespread. But I kind of ask you, is that a damaging kind of stereotype or expectation for boys as well?
Relatively reasonable, but it's also risky because if boys don't have a paycheck, then they're basically doomed.
They're doomed? Are they?
Maybe.
Well, I mean, if you're single and you don't have a paycheck, you've got to sort that out, right? But if, let's say you're married, let's say I'm married, and I lose my job, the college, God forbid, closes and I lose my job, am I doomed? Is my wife going to throw me out in the street the second I lose my job? God, I hope not. Maybe I should ask.
I think I just exaggerated that.
You exaggerated that?
Yeah.
Okay, but what were you sort of trying to say?
Say that it's basically reasonable because, you know, men or boys are supposed to be the main pillar in the family tree,
Yeah.
but it also puts a lot of pressure on them.
Sure.
Because it's like they have a feeling that they must have accomplished something in order to be able to sustain like their family on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, right? There is, that role of man as the provider, the head of the household. Yeah, in a way it diminishes and puts women in sort of a subservient role. But on the other hand, it's also a lot of pressure on men, right? To provide, to achieve. I think I asked this in this class before, but I'll ask it again, although I'm curious what answer we'll get. But guys, would you be okay if I'm assuming heterosexuality here, so if I'm wrong, forgive me, but how would you feel if your wife made more money than you? And I don't mean like, $1,000 a year. I mean like a good solid, I don't know, $30,000 more than you. So yeah. Would you be okay with that? Okay with it? Would it be weird?
Yeah, that's good. It just doesn't really depend a lot on salary.
What doesn't depend on salary? Well, yeah, there's other things for sure, right?
Yeah.
But would it feel weird? It's okay if it's okay to say if it does.
I wouldn't think so because the man is supposed to be because if he's like the head of the family, then he is going to be the one who makes a lot of major decisions in the family.
Right.
And I don't think that those decisions I don't think the decisions really depend on salary.
Ooh, I don't know. I might disagree with you, and I might say that they do. And so, yeah, if the man is expected to be head of the household and kind of, the boss, wears the pants, as they used to say, that's a little easier to do when you're the one bringing in all the money, right? When the money is yours, it's easier to kind of be the boss. But I wonder if that's a lot harder to do when you're not the one bringing in the majority of the money, right? Is your wife willing to, let you make all the decisions while she hands over her much larger paycheck to you? I wonder.
We do have to make a decision by ourselves, even if it's private, we've got to discuss it.
Yeah. Well, and that's true, right? Is that, things are evolving, right? Probably there's not many households where, the father is the sole authority and everybody just does exactly what he says, right? That's probably not that's probably becoming a stereotype in itself. That's probably not really true anymore. But, huh? What's that?
You okay if that the wife make money more than you?
Am I okay with it? Yeah, I'm okay with it. But I'm also aware of the social messaging that I have absorbed. And so to be honest, it might feel a little weird, right? And I might have to remind myself, you feel slightly weird about this, Mike, because of the social messages you've absorbed. And so logically speaking, no, there's nothing wrong. And in any relationship, somebody's going to make more money, right? You're never going to make exactly the same. So somebody's going to make more money, whether it's a little or a lot. But I know the social messages I have absorbed. And so, yeah, it would probably feel a little weird, but I would also know that it feels weird because of the messaging, not because there's anything inherently wrong, and there's not. And I would actually love it if she made $30,000 a year more than me. That'd be fantastic. It's not the case, but it would be fantastic. So yeah, so and maybe, you know, we're going to run out of time here, but you know, one of the things that's kind of helpful about this class is that, you know, and one of the things I keep harping on, I think, is pay attention to social messaging, because they do have an effect on how people feel, right? We do internalize these things and we do act on them. And you know, those two guys that we saw in the last part of the film, they're simply speaking based on their enculturation and their social messaging, right? They've been taught that, yeah, the guy is the provider, the guy is the head of the household, the guy is the one who brings home the money. And if he doesn't do that, then what is he? He's not a man, right? And again, there's, you know, I'm not trying to criticize them at all, but that's what they've absorbed. And those ideas are present in Western culture as well, although people have kind of sort of moved away from them, but they're still there, they're still under the surface. Men are still expected to bring home the bacon, right? You don't find that many couples where, you know, the wife is at work with a high-powered career and the husband is at home taking care of the kids. You don't often find that. There are a few families like that, but not that many, right? Most people kind of mostly fulfill their gender roles, right? Most of the money comes from men. Most of the childcare and the house duties, cleaning and cooking and stuff, most of that is done by women, even if they have a full career of their own. And so, yeah, interestingly, people do tend to follow these sort of social messages and gender roles, even if they kind of, you know, don't
Norway,
follow them perfectly. What's that?
in Norway, or Netherlands, somewhere.
Yeah.
The man takes like a leave, and you have women leave,
Yeah.
and he stays, and the woman goes out to work, or he takes care of the infant.
Yeah. Yeah, they have parental leave in Norway, and I think Sweden does as well, which is great. And actually, Columbia College has it as well. So if a couple has kids, the father can take time off work to look after the kid as well. So yeah, and that's happening, but not in all places, right? Interestingly, particularly the United States, that has horrible childcare and like maternity leave. Everything's horrible down there. I saw an Instagram post that said when mothers give birth, they have to be back to work in 6 weeks. But when if you adopt a little baby puppy, if you get a puppy from a breeder, you can't get them until 8 or 9 weeks. So somehow, human mothers have to go back to work and leave their babies after 6 weeks, but we don't want to give people puppies before 8 or 9 weeks because it's too soon. Does that make any sense?
That's questionable.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, does it? And it's true. Both of those things are true.
I have one question.
Yes.
And speaking about financial status, why is money so important in a relationship?
Ooh, why is money so important in a relationship? Well, because I guess three things. Number one, money is important, right? You need it to pay your rent or your mortgage or to eat or to go on vacation or buy clothes or whatever you want to do, money is needed, right? The second thing is sometimes people have different ways of treating money, right? Some of us are very careful with our money and we make sure that we don't spend too much. Others like to spend, and we're good with that, right? And that can cause conflict, right? Because when you're married or when you're in a relationship, now your financial stability are connected to each other. And if one person's trying to save every penny and the other person's just like running up their credit cards all over the place, you're gonna have conflict, right? And so, yeah, money is critically important for, having a secure life and to be able to do the things or have the things that you want. But people have different ideas about how money should be treated. Should it be carefully saved or should it be spent because you can always make more? And there can also be differences in terms of what people think is important, right? Some people might think, you know what, I think it's really important to buy a brand new car and a fancy one. Whereas the other person might say, you know what, I don't care about the car. I'll drive, as long as it's dependable, I'll drive whatever, but I really want to travel, right? And so you can have competing ideas about how, even if you get that extra money set aside, how should it be spent, right? So yeah, finances are huge, and actually that's one of the things that couples often fight about or have conflict about is money issues. Not so much is there enough, because there's never enough, but how do we use the money that we have? What should it be spent on and how should it be spent? And it can be tricky, especially if you have two people who have wildly different sort of financial approaches. So yeah, it's a thing. It's a big thing. Okay, that is all, good people. Have a nice weekend. I will see you on Monday. Try to enjoy some sun because Daniel says it's going to rain all next week. So thanks, Daniel. It's not your fault. Okay, see you on Monday, guys.